So, I hope, or I imagine, you enjoyed all of the talks. Such variety and such a diverse perspective from different culture. And it's good to have this session in the beginning of the summit. That was a little bit derivative. So thanks to all the speakers keeping the time, we have plenty of time for discussions. And because issues and topics are so diverse, I don't have any steering policy. So you can ask any questions and comments, please. Let's start. So please. Yes.
Hello, my name is Ok Kim from South Korea. Thanks for the Professor Chu's presentation. Wonderful. We've been talking about the Asian bioethics for 18 years so far, from 2001, and then Professor Chu's presentation is the greatest.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. My question is, your presentation today, how widely shared with other Chinese people in scientific community, in government, and in public people?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, because China is so big country, so many people, they are so different opinion. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. I don't know how many agree with us that, but at least our society, Chinese Society for Bioethics, all these major members agree with us and Professor Xiaomei. Yeah. But still, in the science or bioethics, there are different opinions. Still, a part of science against the inheritable genome editing. Same in the ethics, they don't like it. That. So this is different.
Do you have chances to talk to government policy makers and
of course,
other
yeah.
societal?
Of course, because Professor Tsai, he is the vice president of the MOH's Asia Committee. So he will have close contact with the government.
Good. Thank you. So let's go to the next question, please.
Hi, hello. My name is Tiak Fayal. I'm from Nature Genetics. I have a very broad question, which is, as you know, our definition of disease, or what we consider to be disease, has changed over time and is different in different societies. So how do we address that? I mean, how do we, who's going to decide what kind of traits are amenable to change or not? And I think a question is, and related to that, that's the second part of the question, is that we don't often talk about the idea that somebody might want to, either somatically or in terms of germline alterations, change or opt for a trait that we or others would consider to be not advantageous, which brings up the subject, this question of self-harm or even harm to your offspring. So these two parts of the question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If I may something about this, I think the definition of a disease, there is some partially medical. So there are physicians who have lists of diseases, etc., and this list evolves. There has been things not medical now, they have been medicalized, others not. But it's not only medical, there is a social, cultural, and even religious part of the issue. And it seems we will not have consensus about everything. There are things on which we agree and we all go to the hospital in order to read them. And there are things which we do not. But the incoming of the genetics and genomics, I would say, problematize the issue even much more. We listened today to the presentation on schizophrenia and gene expression. Genes are not expressing themselves in one way. There are different ways. So what is normal, what is abnormal, what's natural, what's unnatural, it has been much more problematic than now. We have had a story just yesterday about the germline gene modification. Professor talked about it. Is this treating a disease or enhancement? I think if we discuss this, we will have disagreement now on what kind of. Is this a treatment or this an enhancement? So things became much more complex than before. And I don't think we have really made answers to make the borderline. Medicine regulates a lot in this regard. Social, cultural issues regulate. And there will always be a borderline somewhere, I would say.
May I ask Margaret to give a comment about the first question from anthropology point of view?
Does this work?
Yep.
Thank you very much for your question. It's a very important question, I think, what we believe that disease is. And as you say, it's being defined differently in different cultures and societies. But what in future will happen, I think, the way we define disease, at least treatable disease, really depends on what we are able to do. As we've seen, for instance, with the introduction of NIPT, we've been addressing Down syndrome, and in that sense, the disease that can be treated, as it were, or prevented, we should say, is actually being determined by what we are able to do. So the question is, if we are being able to do much more in future, what traits will become considered as being disease? That might change the entire configuration of what might be disease. And I don't know whether you were hinting at, for instance, deafness. There are many couples that would actually desire to have a deaf child being part of that particular cultural communities. Well, we can look forward to getting many more of those kind of instances, I believe. But of course, many societal factors will be important here, what might be fashion, but also what might be insured in a particular country, whether people will address a certain or even call a certain condition a disease. And so
okay,
the whole...
Thank you.
Sorry.
We'd like to go to, there are many people waiting. Is that okay? So you're saying, yes.
So we've received several questions from a class here in Hong Kong, a class of G10 students who are listening to the webcast live.
Oh, I see.
Their first question is...
Can you speak up a little bit?
Sorry. Their first question is, to what extent will genome technology exacerbate wealth inequality in the future? They ask, what genetic disorders are given priority would be cured first using such genome editing, and how is priority decided? And thirdly, what is the most important negative implication of genome editing?
Yeah, big questions. Maybe we leave it to other scientists. Or any comment from here? Maybe? Yeah. What kind of diseases do we work on? Yes, please.
This question comes very close about the science and how neutral science is. I am of the group who says that science is not neutral, which is not a negative thing at all. Almost nobody is neutral, but we need to be aware of this. Science is not discovering just facts, but important facts. What makes some facts important than others? This is kind of our value system which decides this. So I think the diseases which will have more appeal later is about the easiness, how to deal with them, that there are straightforward solutions to get them, but also the clients who will benefit from them. Are they able to afford the costs? Because in the beginning, we can imagine that it will be very expensive. You mentioned something about 85,000 or 800,000? 800,000. So I would say the diseases which hit the rich will be treated more or be prioritized than those which will. These kind of, I think, factors, availability of funding, etc.
Thank you. So let's keep discussing this in the other sessions too. Please.
Yes, I'm Father Joseph Tam from Hong Kong originally. Now I teach ethics in Italy, in Rome, from a pontifical university. My question here is, I think the deeper question that is addressed is about human perfection and imperfection. Whether we as humanity would look down upon those who are disabled or diseased as less than human or almost less advantaged, and so we should either improve them or eliminate them. I wonder if that's kind of like, I see that that's the main debate that's going on, whether we should look upon humanity as someone who's perfect in an idealized way, and saying that those who are not perfect or less than perfect or imperfect, they should be shunned or eliminated, like in the case of Down syndrome, which is happening
Thank
right
you.
now.
Thank you. Maurizio and Margaret, please.
Yeah, I think that genome editing doesn't open a completely new scenario. I mean, we already treat a lot of diseases, and so I think that there is a continuity between genome editing intervention and what we already do. I mean, so I would outline the continuity, and so it is not something new that we should be shocked about what we can do.
Thank you. Well, we should recognize that some of the questions are general about medical interventions, and also some questions are specific to genome editing. And Margaret, if you have any comment.
Well, the perfect human, of course, doesn't exist. We all know that. But I think the question really relates to notions of identity and whether we can or may are allowed to feel comfortable with our identities, and to what extent the possibility of being able to change a human will not create enormous anxiety among people. Even say, if the practice would be entirely safe, how many social and political issues this will create is, well, unimaginable for us now, I believe. And that's probably why many people feel uncomfortable with especially changing generations of human genome. But this is all very much speculative. I mean, there are quite a few patients that would like to find a solution for their disease. There are also many patients that would not want to change their identity. For instance, we can think about muscular dystrophy. There are many patients that want to find a cure, But there are also many patients that for a long part, well, most part of their lives have been hoping for a cure, but have spent their lives going to hospitals and not finding one. And so there are also people that prefer to just stick to their identity, especially when, time passes.
Thank you. Well, I take a few questions first, then go back to the panel. So please, you first.
Sure. My name is Zhang Gao. I'm a professor here in HKU. This is a question for Dr. Faulkner and for the panelists. My question is, your presentation hits this existential question about what does it mean to be human? And it's a question that humankind had struggled with for eons. So my question is, are there anywhere in history that we can draw experience from looking at this, the new frontier, and whether or not if this is so transformative, so new, that we have no precedent to draw from? And that's my first question. The second question is, in the discourse on human gene editing, is there room for philosophical debates? Is it conceivable that we will reach a consensus that is applicable to across different culture and religion and political divides?
Thank you. So I take the question, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Ames Dai from South Africa, a professor in Johannesburg. And I want to look at, make a comment basically on the germline editing that was announced by China yesterday in terms of HIV immunity. And we've heard the presentation which said, you could either have it for treatment or for enhancement, and what you looked at was enhancement. But coming from the heart of the pandemic in South Africa, you could have a counter-argument that this could be what we've been looking for, the answer in terms of prevention, because prevention has failed dismally in our part of the world, the normal modalities of prevention. And we could look at it as quite an advance in terms of public health measures, assuming that it was safe and effective, and the costs were not so foreboding. And when you actually look at the preventative trials at the moment, the vaccine preventative trials, for example, currently the researchers are actually having a huge concern in terms of the planning of preventative trials because of what they would need to include in the control arm, because you can no longer use a placebo. So the trials themselves are becoming quite expensive as well. So yes, one would be perhaps interfering in the evolutionary processes, etc., but maybe that could be an answer for some parts of the world.
Okay, thank you. I'll start by answering the previous question and then go to the current, that one. So definition of human, and also whether we can have philosophical discourse for the discussions on genome editing. And yes, please.
Thank you very much for a very interesting and difficult question, which I'm not sure I will be able to answer, what it is to be human. I think that, necessarily we will have very different answers for this. But one of the things I would like to remark here is that what we think it is to be human, we don't have the means to put that into words. And I was referring to McGilchrist's work, and he emphasizes that the conceptualization of what the world looks like in categories and what we experience is something different from our actually lived experience of our humanity. And so we are actually facing a situation in which we actually cannot put into words properly what it is to be a human and what kind of human we'd like to be, because it's more than just language alone. And I want to be short about this. And the second question was about, is there any room for philosophical debate?
Yep.
Well, that's related again to the answer I had just then, because our knowledge is also necessarily embodied if we want to practice it. We can theorize all we want. It helps us very much to get forward in our thinking, but as soon as we try to apply it in practice, we have many social, economic and cultural conditions to take into account. And whether we philosophically can get to agreement, I think we might be able to, but whether everyone will be able and have a say in this is a different question altogether.
Satoshi, do you have any comment about philosophy, roles of philosophy?
I just agree with what Margaret said. It's about philosophical debate, whether ever having a conclusion. I think it's, I don't know, it's perhaps quite empirical. It's you cannot say in advance theoretically. It won't have any. We won't have any consensus in philosophy. It's just it's a big question about philosophy and science. I think we have to try a bit.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the second question about HIV for public health measures, anybody comments? I suppose we have to leave it to the next or maybe other talks, yes. Particularly tomorrow. Yeah, I hope it's okay for the lady who asked the question. Please, please keep discussing. Let's keep discussing, yes. So please, yes.
Hi, I'm Daniela from Bloomberg. I have a question specifically for Professor Chiu. So just now, as you mentioned, maybe later I can use Mandarin to
say clearly a question. Short question, please.
Okay. So although we have the legal framework already in China in the gene business, but it's so the legal framework is still developing, but we do have some regulation and prohibition already.
Just a moment. We do have some regulations in China. Yeah.
And why did yesterday's news about Mr. He's research still happen? Would you elaborate some reasons behind that? So some legal reasons or maybe some social reasons? Are Chinese people more relaxed in terms of the morally and ethical things related to the business? Or is the demand too strong in this industry in China? So would you elaborate some reasons behind that? Why it will happen? Thank you.
The question is, why was that happen? Why was Mr. He happened when you have it? Sorry?
Yeah.
Does he think that it really happened?
First,
That's the first. And then
Yeah.
First, do you think that happened already?
We have two regulations on the genetic modified embryo, how to deal with that. So one is a regulation on assisted reproduction. In this regulation, it prohibits genetic modified embryo implant into the human reproductive tract. Second regulation is the MOH, Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Science and Technology joint promulgate. The name is Human Embryonic Stem Cell Research Ethical Guiding Principle. In this regulation, reconfirm that you can do that. You cannot implant genetic modified embryo into the human reproductive tract. The problem is that there are no penalty, no article on if you violate the regulation, how the penny do you have to say?
Okay.
The problem is that.
May I ask Professor Charles? Do you want to say it? It's okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So let's go to the next question, please.
Yes, I'm J.D. Hansen with the International Center for Technology Assessment in Washington, D.C. For a number of years, I staffed the United Methodist Church's Genetic Science Task Force and have served on the World Council of Churches Bioethics Task Force. And so I'm glad to hear a number of the panelists make reference to the fact that there is religion in the world. That's not my question, though. I also appreciate the reference to ecological matters. Most of the time when we talk about genetics, there is ecology everywhere in the world, but inside the cell. And do any of you have any comments on, in the United States, there are 85,000 chemicals. Almost none of them have been tested for what the mutagenic effects of those chemicals are. We always hear about the few cancers that are genetically linked, but we don't hear about chemicals that change the genome. The biggest gene editing that's being done in the world is being done by all these synthetic chemicals we've unleashed. Any comments about how we deal with that philosophically and practically?
Any of you? Well, let's take next question. And then, well, I think we leave the question to the scientists. Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you anyway for pointing out. Oh, okay.
I don't think it's meant to be a scientific question, this question actually. And so I'm grateful for the question, really.
Yes.
I don't have very much to say about it, but considering that we have been unable to look after the environment very well through similar mechanisms such as marriage between industry and whatever consumer society wants,
I see.
it would of course be very careful to see what kind of genome pollution could be created through off-target interventions. So I think that certainly needs to be philosophized, though I'm not the person to do that.
Yeah.
But
What kind of changes are we having for our genomes? It should be the basis for the discussion for genome editing application. Any comment, please? Yes.
Related to the question, to the last question, but also to the question about what is human, I think that we have always to consider that we are already modified. I mean, we are enhanced, modified, and so we are different in comparison with past generations because we can do a lot of things. We have a lot of capacities that past generation didn't have. And so we should not forget that we already modify ourselves, and I think it is important.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that in the Arab world where I stay, we have witnessed these issues of chemical weapons and using weapons of mass destruction and trying some weapons that we don't know what they are and what they do exactly. And there have been so many victims in a country like Iraq. This happened the last years. And we have seen new types of cancer that were not seen before in this population. So I completely endorse the concern about discussing gene modification in another context, not only in the lab, but because of the wars we have witnessing now, because of trying new weapons and all this stuff. The other point I wanted to say, because there was a question about the philosophical and religious, and now again the issue of religion. I think the mode of the discussions we have now is much more driven by calculating the risks and benefits. And most of the time, these risks and benefits are approached through a medical lens and economic lens. So if there is safety, efficacy, low cost, it should be good. If not, we don't do it. This is the mode. I would say this is a reductionist approach, I would say. Every human being, not only people who believe in a religion or who are, every person has his or her own moral world. And in this moral world, we care not only about the money, and not only about the pluses and minuses of our health condition, but we have also our children, we have our families that we care about. I'm a professor at the university. My students, I care about them. If they are not improving well, I don't feel happy. So we have many things to care about. So our happiness is not just because our health condition is good, not just because we are rich, but we have other many things. The atrocities we have in life now, not because we have diseases only. The pain we suffer is not only because we have diseases, we suffer because of many other things. And religion, when it comes to religion in specific, I spent half of my life in the Netherlands, where I was working at Leiden University, so in the West, and the other half of my life is between Egypt and now in Qatar, in the Arab world. In the West, religion has been seen since the modern day as private morality. Private group of people who think that there is God, etc., but it cannot be part of public morality. But in the Muslim majority countries where I was born and now where I work, it cannot be seen as private morality. You cannot speak about morality if religion is not part of the discussion. So it depends on the context where you are.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very good. Please.
Thank you, Kazuto. My name is Jennifer Merchant, and I'm from the University of Paris, and I have a question for Maurizio Balistreri. I was very happy that you introduced the importance of gender, and so my question is a provocative one. If, according to you, or if I understood you correctly, if artificial uteruses and synthetic embryos become a reality one day, will those solve all the gender problems and the heavy weight put on women to bear children?
Thank you. So I take next question, please. Yes.
Hi, my name is Xiang Chen, and I'm with MIT Technology Review. And for all our readers in the US, global, and in China, I'm going to ask my question in both English and Chinese. And this is directed at Professor Chiu. So regarding the implementation of the genetically edited embryos and the birth of the twins, we call it as the incident in China right now. Regarding the ethics review board, the ethics review committee, what happened this time that they're supposed to safeguard this type of events from happening? What happened, and what's the process that they should have done to prevent this from happening?
So I didn't understand. Yeah.
So I'll say it in Chinese. Okay.
Is that okay? You can answer?
Oh,
yeah, please.
I just mentioned that maybe.
Sorry, maybe.
I will. Okay.
Sorry,
maybe this ethics review is a fraud. It's a fraud.
It's fraud.
But this hospital not affiliated with the certain unity of science technology. Because according to regulation, there should be institutional review board. Your institution, they have a review board or IC committee. They review and approve the protocol. But the Dr. He, they are turned to the hospital. The hospital is not affiliated with the Southern University of Science and Technology. So this is a fraud. So this is invalid. Recently, we received a message from the mobile. The Southern University of Science and Technology say that Dr. He did this research. We don't know. They did it outside the university.
Okay,
so
yes.
they will investigate this case, then affix the legal liability. So.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll take this issue tomorrow as well. So please ask other questions, and I turn to give the microphone to Maurizio.
Thank you for your question, Jennifer.
For Jennifer's question.
I think that we cannot expect that women undergo to assisted reproduction intervention because they have to sacrifice every own interest in favor of the future baby. But if tomorrow women can obtain eggs from somatic cells, if they can let the baby develop in artificial uterus, maybe we will not have anymore a conflict between the interests of women and the interests of baby. And so maybe the scenarios will completely change. And maybe at that point, I would say women have a responsibility to let the embryo develop in vitro and not sexually.
Okay.
My name is Priscilla Song from the Center for the Humanities in Medicine at the University of Hong Kong. And I was very heartened to see that social, ethical, legal, and religious reflections are being taken front and center at the summit. And my question for the panelists is, how can scholars in the humanities and the social sciences participate meaningfully in an interdisciplinary dialogue and to really affect change in the way that the science is being practiced, implemented, regulated, and considered? Thank you very much.
Can you tell me which department are you in?
The Center for the Humanities and Medicine at HKU.
This university.
At this university.
Thank you very much for the question. So I take this next question and then go back to the panel.
Right. Hi, I'm from another confusing department at Hong Kong U, the Ethics and Humanities Unit at the Faculty of Medicine. My name is Harry Wu, I'm a historian. And my question is that, okay, for the past few decades, that in the age of genetic determinism, science shirks the responsibility to parents and the general public. And then now with the new promises of genetic manipulation, the general public are not really suffering from less, they're suffering from more uncertainty. So in view of this, scientists, what should scientists promise the general public, and what shouldn't scientists promise the general public? This is just a practical question. Thank you.
Thank you. So I open the panel for 2 questions. First question, please. First. Role of humanities and social scientists.
Again, as I mentioned about the role of religion in general, it depends where you are. Now where I work in Qatar and in other countries in the Gulf region and in the Muslim majority countries, religious scholars are even asked. So they are not presenting themselves to say, we have something to say, no. It's even they are approached by physicians, by scientists to ask them, what do you think? Because if you go to the public, the first question will be, what does our religion say about this? So if you don't want to get backlash from society, you have to prepare yourself from the beginning and to prepare good answers for the questions that will come about what does Islam, which plays a very important role in the fabric of the moral world in this part for these populations. So it is very much in the center of the discussions. As I explained in my presentation, from the 1980s, we have this collaboration between biomedical scientists and Muslim religious scholars up to the moment discussing all these issues. In other parts of the world, this can be difficult, a little bit less visible, the role of religion. Even philosophers can be difficult, as I said, a matter of calculating the benefits and harms in economic and medical aspect, which I would say losing an important piece of wisdom that people can share with each other.
Yeah, thank you. But I don't know what do you mean the social science. If social science includes humanities, I think it's very important. The ethics, the philosophical, very important. I want to mention that we just request the government to stop the head transplantation. This is very important. Is the province whole benefit from this operation? This will involve some philosophical problem, identity problem. This is philosophical, yeah. And ethics, I think, is mainly the ethics, because what should do, how should to do is the ethical problem. And also law. Law is very important. When we translate the ethical inquiry into the action, we have to depend on the law.
Thank you very much. Is that all right? So what about telling general public about the genomics? The second question. Well, Satoshi, how about you? You emphasize the importance of democratic processes, which needs input and understanding by the general public.
Yeah, I think that relates to the first question. It's what social scientists or humanities, researchers in humanities can do. There are many things that we can do, but one is sort of destroy this neat sort of compartments, like this, take this public engagement or public outreach. I think, we have this talk about science, ethics, governance, and public engagement, but we cannot do this sort of in a neat compartment. It all relates. What I said about democracy is to think more deeply about ethics, we have to have public engagement part. So perhaps one good way of what humanities or philosophy can do is to destroy, do this Socratic horsefly thing. Just
may I ask
people.
pose one question? Mm-hmm. This is Asia, Hong Kong, and we are from Japan and China and so on. Usually, it's not easy in our countries to engage general public because they are rather quiet and not so vocal. So,
yeah, I think that's
sorry.
So
maybe
yeah, I understand.
Please understand. On average, yeah.
No, I think that's the wrong way to think about this. Citizens, this even like expert panel on bioethics in Japan. They, or Science Council of Japan, encourage citizens to, participate in the discussion, but they don't really do anything about this. What if we have legislation or referendum about this, like Brexit? We will have a discussion, on this seriously, in a serious matter way. So we have to have political scientists, these people as well, to have more debate.
I didn't mean to be provocative, but we'll take this issue to the third day for the public engagement session. All are connected. So I'm sorry, I take last question from the gentleman and then finish. I'm sorry. Yeah.
My name is Michael. I'm from Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. My question is, again, to Professor Kodama, is actually twofold. So one is actually directly relating to the democracy aspect you just mentioned. Especially, if you actually look at the whole Western society at the moment, we can see that, popular media is very powerful in shaping opinions of the people. And even just now, I texted my grandma about what I've been hearing here, and she was seriously concerned, obviously because she doesn't have the background knowledge, relating to the topics. Therefore, my question was, how much knowledge do you feel comfortable to educate people who make the decisions for the legislations? And the second aspect has to do with the longevity of the laws. So you mentioned longevity of the laws. So you mentioned that a problem is that once a law is made, it's probably going to be there forever. Do you think that we should come forward or step forward as a scientific community to our independent governments and make sure that when laws relate to science and to technology, they should be given a time limit, and where after a certain amount of years, maybe 5 years, they will have to be revisited to kind of ensure that this progress is made?
So it's to Satoshi.
I didn't say this in my presentation, but congresspersons needs to be educated as well. But I think there's a cynicism, or perhaps that I feel, cynicism in Japan that it's really not, they cannot really make a good law, if I can say so. So it's the expert panel and so this elite part of the society who can make good guidelines. But in that way, I think we are circumventing this discussion on the whole democratic process. Democracy takes time, and we have to have debate. But people in expert panel say we have to have a very short period of time. We have to have ethical guidelines at this moment. In a half a year. It's science needs that time, that time period, short time. But just it's sort of contradicting our idea of democracy. And as you said, perhaps we should have a kind of timetable or sort of a limitation of time when we make law or legislation. But the example of example of organ transplantation in Japan, they have this limitation of law. They have to, in certain period of years, they have to revise the law. But congresspersons, I think, are too busy to, revise these things. So we have problem, but I think we have to say that it's the way to go.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, we don't have time yet. So it's. Thank you for asking many questions, and thank you for lots of answers. And I hope all of you have learned a lot and now have wider perspectives for the coming sessions. And I'd like to close the session. Thank you very much.
Very good, very good. Oh, yes. Can I have a photo session? Thank you.